I think it's now becoming really clear that call centers are going to be the first really big disruption caused by AI.
Yeah.
I mean, all the level one customer support is going to get replaced by AI. I mean, LLMs plus voice, because, OpenAI just released their audio API. You saw that at the All In Summit, we released a Mearsheimer AI.
Yeah.
Where we trained it on all of his work, and you can go to Mearsheimer.ai and ask it questions, and it will tell you the answers in his voice because we cloned his voice using Resemble AI. Anyway, so AI can do voice now, and it can be trained extremely well on large data sets to give you answers to questions, which is pretty much what customer support is. So I think.
So yeah, that's so true. Like with the latest in voice AI, companies like 11 Labs are producing ever more natural sounding voices, and the LLMs are becoming that much better at fielding questions. There's a ton of additional automation, especially for those L1 kind of frontline agents that field the simpler questions customers have. There's still a ton of challenges left, creating a consistent response and being able to handle objections and stories and customers not even being able to describe the issue they have. There's a lot of these issues that would be challenging to get LLMs to do, but in time that will happen. A bit of what's missing also is all the AI will do for the human agents, because it's also going to up-level them. But let's keep listening.
It's now becoming clear that I think within the next 2 to 3 years, you're going to see a massive disruption in that industry.
I agree with that massively. And I think there's another underreported story, which is people don't like to call and talk to a customer service agent, like an actual human, if they can avoid it. They would much rather go on YouTube and say, how do I fix this? Or, ask ChatGPT, how do I fix this? It's like, I don't want to waste another person's time. Just give me the answer as quick as possible, and AI will give you the answer quicker. YouTube will give you the answer.
So that's true. Like people, some segment of the population prefers to self-serve. But it's also true that there's the people that want the human touch. They want to talk to someone. When their internet is out, they want the sympathy, and they want to be heard, and or maybe they want to negotiate a deal. And there's all these reasons why people are prefer to talk to someone. At one large telco that I used to work with in the past, over half of people would press 000 up front. And so there's all these habits that people have in place that you would have to overcome if you were to automate at a larger scale.
I've had so many times where I have people who work for me who are like, I don't know how to do that. And I literally would walk up to their computer and load YouTube and type in, how do I blank? And there's a video there. Watch it on 2-speed. You can do it. That's what's, going to also kill this. Like, I don't want to talk to a human. Just change my flight. Just,
but you
answer my question.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about disruption. Call centers are a very big part of the economy in certain geographies.
Oh,
Denver, Salt Lake, parts of Florida.
Arizona.
Yeah, exactly. It's a really big deal. If like half the cost gets ripped out of those call centers.
Where would you move those people? If you had your choice, could they move to sales?
Well, I think sales will be the one that's disrupted after customer support.
Okay.
But I don't know. I think it's going to be very disruptive. One of the reasons I think this is.
So there's going to be jobs in the U.S., call center jobs that would be automated away. And those folks will need to find new types of roles that they can do. It's also true that AI, especially the kind that we're working on at Tomato AI, which reduces the accent heard on calls, will create a ton of jobs globally. All of a sudden, you'll have those people in every corner of the earth available to do a higher level, higher quality type of support at a much lower price point. And so there's going to be this interesting dichotomy of like certain jobs being automated away, other jobs being created. And so there's going to be major shifts globally.
In the early days of LLMs, people were saying that legal services would be disrupted. And you saw some very highly valued startups rocketing up based on that. I think the problem with that is the error rate. So when you think about AI applications, you have to think about what is the tolerable error rate that the industry will allow. Because we know that AIs get things wrong, they can hallucinate, and you're never going to be able to make it perfect. I mean, you can improve the quality, but it's still going to have some errors. And when you're dealing with like legal services, for example, you just can't have mistakes. It's just not tolerated. However, customer support is different. Customer support is already organized into levels, level 1, level 2, level 3, based on difficulty. And there's already, in a sense, a mechanism for failover. If like the level 1 customer support person can't answer the question, they kick it up to level 2. So there's a place for LLMs to start in customer support, which is replacing all the level 1 and then working their way up the chain to level 2.
So that's true. There's these different levels at call centers, the level 1 agents, 2, 3, and the lower level agents take on less complex kind of calls. Complexity can be across different dimensions. It could be more expertise needed or knowledge, like maybe tech support. So that's a higher level of complexity. But there's another kind of complexity that is needed for the level 3, for example, agents. And that's like extra level of empathy, sympathy, listening skills. So customers that are charged, angry, upset can be heard better. And so those also need to be addressed by any automated solution. Can you address both types of complexity is going to be a big challenge.
As they get better and better. And so what I'm saying is that the level of accuracy now, especially with the new PhD level reasoning models, is good enough. Yeah. We don't need to wait for like some perfect LLM model. And I think this is why this is going to be a big, big disruption. Millions of people potentially are going to have their jobs disrupted or at least transformed.
Well, it could be the end of the entire career as well, Chamath. If you were to look at this 4x4 sort of quadrant chart that Sachs is describing, which is the cost of an era, and the actual complexity of the job, perhaps, or the cost of the job. How do you look at this? I know you're working on software that kind of does this with your startup as well.
I mean, I'll preview one use case from 8090, which is pretty stunning. We work with a very large, regulated, highly regulated company, public company. And they have a very complicated set of people and processes because of the field in which they're in. And David, your point is exactly right. It took us a fairly long time, but we're at a point now where we've been running AI-powered software versus the old legacy deterministic solution. And we've been running it at 100% accuracy now for about 10 days. So this is still very new. And it's an incredible thing because, to your point, our first version was like in the mid 80s, then we were in the mid 90s, then we were 97, 98%.
So yeah, there's going to be an opportunity when you have an AI model handling conversations to keep close tabs on hallucinations, where it goes off track, not giving the response that is expected or needed. And so iterative kind of work. But the benefit of doing it with AI is once you close a gap, that gap is closed for good. With the human agents, you have to re-close the gap every time there's a new agent to train. So there's those kind of benefits. Still, there's going to be the limitations. Really depends on the use case and complexity of the industry. Some industries like telecom have very complex conversations and therefore only like 30 to 50% automation. Other industries like banking, pretty simple, straightforward conversations, more like 60 to 80% automation. And so it really depends how complex those conversations are. That will determine how much more automation will be achievable.
And it just took a lot of engineering to figure out how to get to 100, but now it's at 100 and it's been consistently at 100. And so we're all kind of like scratching our head because now the next step is, well, what do we do? To your point, what do we do? So we're figuring that out right now. But the art of the possible is that I think well-crafted AI software is as good as deterministic software in the sense that the error rates will be equivalent in production and at the level of a very highly regulated public company. And I think that's the gold standard because in those sectors, those companies have zero tolerance. It's not a toy. It's not even, level 1 customer support. It's system of record type work.
Yeah.
But it shows what's possible. And to your point, Sachs, we're doing that today, even though they're the best models. Imagine how good the underlying models will get in a year from now.
Yeah.
Right. And we'll be able to take on more and more work. It's very stunning, actually. It's really.
Have you guys worked with the?
So yeah, certain industries will have much lower tolerance for errors. For example, if it's life and death, let's say we're talking about medicine, this can be a much higher bar. But if we're talking about travel, where it's a regulated industry as well, there's going to be an opportunity to use more of the AI for automation than other industries. So still, there's a massive opportunity to help humans with AI. That remains true. And there, with the human in the loop, you can have their judgment used for filtering out these kind of errors that maybe in certain implementations, AI is still not good enough to address.
You guys worked with the O1 preview yet? I just literally have been using this new reasoning engine that OpenAI released, and it is extraordinary. And it's kind of thinking about the next 3 or 4 prompts you would do. And I literally just got this while we were on the show. I've hit the limit for my paid account because this thing is so intense on compute, I guess.
Well, the thing with O1 is that I think it's starting to add reasoning, but the way that you do reasoning is sort of this idea that you have this chain of thought. And I think that that's a very powerful but early concept. And as we refine those ways in which these models get to better answers, the wonderful thing is that OpenAI will preview O1, and then they'll have the actual O1 production build probably in the next couple of months, which will be probably pretty spectacular. But then you'll see.
So one of the things that's interesting about being able to better predict what someone will say based on what they've said is there are certain technologies like translation AI, real-time translation AI, that today have like a 5-second delay, so they're not fully real-time. And that's because you don't know, you need to hear enough of what's being said to know how to translate it. And in some languages, the noun-verb order is flipped, and so you really have to hear it out. Now, if we can predict what's being said with high accuracy, then that could lead to those kind of technologies. That's less so about automation, more so about empowering humans to do support in any language in real time. But that kind of predictive capability getting better will have these like second order effects.
And you'll see something from Claude, you'll see something from Llama, and the real art, I think, and this is where I do think it's a little bit of alchemy still, which I think is good because it keeps humans involved, all of us involved.
Yes.
Right? Is how do you stitch all of those things together to get to a 0% error rate? What Sachs said, how do you minimize the blast radius and how do you make sure these things are super high quality?
Right.
Well, and people don't.
It's still a very hard technical problem.
Go ahead, Sachs, and then I'll show you what.
So
ChatGPT
one of the
doing.
reasons why I'm bullish on this customer support use case is because there's a very large data set to train on. You've got all of the product documentation that companies have already created. You've got all of the previous email support,
and calls.
And calls. Yeah, the calls have been recorded, so you can now train the AI on that. So there's a very large body of data to train the AI model on. And it's not necessarily the most proprietary. It's not like dealing with people's medical records or even confidential.
So yeah, that's so true. Like in customer support, there's so much data that you can train your model on, and it's exactly the data you would need the AI to mimic. In my previous role at Google, we would use 2 million conversations per AI model, and so that massive amount of data really goes a long way towards like teaching the AI the exact behavior you need.
Legal documents, something like that. So the data is readily available, and then the foundation models are getting really good. I think there's a big question here about value capture, which is there's a number of startups now that are becoming very highly valued that are chasing this disruption, this sort of customer support agent disruption, and they're getting into very high valuations, even unicorn valuations already. And the question is, well, wait, if the foundation models are advancing at such a rate, like a year from now, why couldn't a developer, just a startup of a few guys, take next year's model and train it and then commoditize the...
You're making such a good point. So when we were trying to figure out like what applications we would build and like which sectors of the economy we would go after, I was like, guys, we got to go after the hardest, most regulated places, because those are the things and places and people that have absolutely zero tolerance for error.
Yeah, so this speaks to the moat that startups need to have in order to defend their business. You can't have it so that if someone hears your idea, they can just compete with you well. Or if an incumbent hears the idea and likes it, that they, using their market position and strength, completely obliterate you. And so, it's so key to find what are your moats. And so if you go after regulated industries and you can sell your way into those kind of deals, the switching costs are high. You've gone through all these gates in order to get embedded, and it's hard to extract you. And so, as the models get better and better, more people will be going after the low-hanging fruit. But if you're an entrepreneur, find like what's like something hard to do, unique to my skill set or team skill set that will keep us ahead of anyone that wants to just go after us.
And where you're going to need to do some amount of customization and specialization to actually solve these problems. And Sachs, to your point, like when you see, and I said, we cannot touch customer service. We cannot touch it because it's going to get commoditized and run over by these foundational models within a year.
Right.
You'll be able to deploy these. It's just too easy.
You'll be able to do it on a local computer. I mean, you'll just download the entire database of every call on a MacBook with an M3
and by the way,
just
to build on that, the other thing that's now possible, and you saw this with Klarna, because Klarna put out this like cryptic tweet/press release where, I think maybe it was in their earnings. Nick, maybe you can find this, where they're like, we've deprecated Salesforce and Workday.
That was strange.
So that's right. Like the LLM companies are now going big on customer support, and they're going to disrupt automation and customer support. We saw OpenAI with their new Intent CX solution going into T-Mobile. T-Mobile is a massive account, 100,000 or so agents, massive cost center, and they're going in. Now the reality is the LLMs are too expensive to use, and so they're using smaller versions of the model and customizing them, putting guardrails, providing the APIs, let's say an intent can use, the entities to collect, very prescriptive, because you need a very reliable, consistent answer. So small models are more cost effective per turn of a conversation and per session. Coupled with some guidance per intent. So it's not just, today at least, a situation where you just upload all the historical conversation and press go. There's still a lot you need to do to make it work for the enterprise.
How can a company that big deprecate those two systems of record? How is that even? How is it possible?
I think it means they're writing their own, right?
Well, I'll tell you how it's possible. And so this is like this next crazy thing that's been happening. We've been doing a version of this to go after some other sources of software. We haven't had the balls, to be honest, to go after Salesforce or Workday. But here's how they do it. They write these agents, and these agents can spawn other agents, right? So it's very classic kind of machine that builds a machine. And you start to observe the inputs and outputs of a system. Right, I'm hyper simplifying, but it'll make the point. And over time, what the agents start to do is by observing the inputs and the outputs, they start to guess on what the intervening code is. And the code paths must be in the middle to generate the outputs based on these inputs. And so over time, what happens is you develop a digital twin, and then you run that against that counterfactual, against Workday or Salesforce. And then at some point, you're like, it's the same. And then you just say, turn it off. And you're saving yourself tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. So it's a version of what Klarna did. It takes an enormous amount of technical strength to do it. It also takes tremendous, I think, executive courage and leadership, because I think that's a very difficult decision to embark on. But if you're an engineer, that must be an unbelievably exciting technical challenge to be a part of. But that's the basic premise of what they were able to do. Hopefully they share.
So yeah, that's so exciting, that's coming. The ability to just listen in to how an application works and have the AI create this digital twin. Now, there's all these bells and whistles that come with enterprise software, and this will probably work for more straightforward use cases and applications. But I gotta imagine that for more complicated things, it's going to take more technical prowess and effort to get to a place where you actually can wind down your application. But really exciting to hear this kind of direction that AI is taking us in.
More, and maybe they even open source what they did, because I think it would just be an amazing thing for all of us to look at.
Yeah, I mean, to restate it, watch people use a piece of software, and then based on what they do, you could write the code, which you could take a video of a video game today, like Angry Birds, and somebody did this. You give the Angry Birds iPad, game from 15 years ago to AI, it's going to back into the code just by watching it. So why not just watch people use Salesforce or Workday? And those are very expensive products, thousands of dollars per user, right?
I want to get Sax's point of view. Like, the thing in enterprise software that we were always told is you cannot touch these systems of record. Don't ever start a systems of record company. Don't try to touch these systems of record companies. Don't, try to disrupt them. It's an impossible task. But then the question is, if you have these things, why do you necessarily need a system of record in the way that you needed to before, when you're writing all this clunky deterministic code?
What do you think, Sam?
I don't know.
So yeah, this is the promise of AI, to learn from examples, not to be told and given instructions. And so this is a really cool way of learning by example. Here's an application, learn what it does, and then copy it. Really will be interesting to see how this develops in the market.
Well, I saw the Klarna story where they said they were going to rip out Salesforce and Workday because they were able to write their own bespoke code using AI. I mean, I have to say I'm a little bit skeptical of that story for a couple of reasons. One is, if that's their goal, why wouldn't they have open sourced these products that they created? You might as well get the whole ecosystem working on it, because they're not trying to sell this product that they've internally created. They're just trying to rip out the cost. So why not let the whole ecosystem see it? The other thing is, if it's so easy to do, why hasn't the market already been flooded with new startups that are effectively able to reverse engineer?
I don't think you're right. I don't think it's easy to do, because I don't think there's a generalization here that's productizable. Do you know what I mean? Like, I do think that these are very custom specific things. So maybe there's like some scaffolding, but I don't think that scaffolding has a ton of economic value. I think it's really good open source stuff.
Yeah.
I think it's what you build on top of it. And so that hasn't been figured out yet, for sure.
Yeah, look, I think that if you're only using a few use cases of these big, complicated software packages, then yeah, it's probably easier than ever to deprecate them, eliminate them from your stack and just have your own internal engineers build specifically what you need in a more tightly integrated way. I think that is possible.
Yeah, that's going to be a major issue. If you're just watching the API calls, you don't know what the actual user interface is. So there's a whole other stream you need to have where the AI watches the visuals too, in order to mimic it without maybe triggering any copyright issues. Anyway, copyright's going to be a major issue. Software is copyrighted. And so you'll need to also like think through that and how you get around that. With that, folks, thanks so much for joining today. It's been fun to riff on these guys that we all know well. Enjoy the rest of the day.